Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Conrad Gorlinski, and this is the news. Well, there was another conversation between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin yesterday, the fourth in a short while. It was described as efficient and professional, but doesn't seem to have changed any of the dynamics of the current situation on the russo-ukrainian border.
A high representative of the White House said at a press briefing that Biden made security proposals which would be mutually beneficial, but it is still unclear whether Russia is serious about the bilateral diplomatic talks. The official declined to provide details of the proposals, but stressed that they had been previously consulted with allies and many of them had already been presented to the public. As he emphasized, the Russian invasion remains a possibility that cannot be ignored, and there were no signals to indicate a de-escalation of tensions on the part of Russia. Biden was to warn Putin that the eventual war would lead to great human suffering, and for Russia, it would result in increased isolation, a drastic blow to its economy, and increased dependence on China. He added that the coordination of actions on the potential implementation sanctions has entered a culminating phase, and in the event of a renewed invasion, Washington intends to increase the shipment of weapons to Ukraine and to strengthen NATO's eastern flank. The 62-minute conversation between the two leaders was the fourth since the beginning of the crisis caused by the concentration of Russian forces in Crimea and around Ukraine. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that Russia may resort to provocation to justify invading Ukraine. However, at a press conference in Honolulu, Hawaii, Antony Blinken reiterated that the road to a diplomatic end to the crisis was still open.
I'll also make clear, as I have consistently, that if Russia is genuinely interested in resolving this crisis of its own making through diplomacy and dialogue, we're prepared to do that. In fact, that's our preferred path. It's the right and responsible thing to do. But it must take place in the context of de-escalation. So far, we've only seen escalation from Moscow.
He stated that the risk of Russian military action in Ukraine is high enough and the threat imminent enough to justify the withdrawal of a significant proportion of U.S. Embassy personnel in Kiev, as previously announced by the State Department. Moreover, as reported by the Élysée Palace, Putin also held a telephone conversation with French President Emmanuel Macron to ease the growing tension in the Russia-Ukraine crisis. The Kremlin only confirmed that the conversation had taken place without providing any further details.
As the conflict over Ukraine escalates, the Russian Navy is holding military drills in Belarus and now also in the Black Sea. They have over 30 ships participating in training exercises there. A Russian Kilo-class submarine, Rostov-on-Don, passed through Turkey's Dardanelles Strait on the way back to the Black Sea to join the rest of the Russian Navy. During the week, 6 Russian naval landing ships had sailed back to the Black Sea through the Bosphorus Strait. In the drill, the Surface Ship Unit, Naval Aviation Unit, and Coastal Defense Unit of the fleet will carry out missile and artillery strikes targeted at sea, coastal, and air targets. The drill aims to exercise defense scenarios of the coastline of the Crimean Peninsula, the bases of the Black Sea Fleet, and Russia's economic and maritime communication facilities, as well as its marine economic zone from possible military threats. Russia announced that this month its Navy would stage a sweeping set of exercises involving all its fleets, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, as the latest show of strength in a surge of military activity during the standoff with the West. And among a handful of countries, Australia has now temporarily suspended operations of its embassy in Kiev and evacuated its personnel due to what they see as a rapidly deteriorating situation on the border.
The employees of the Australian embassy in Kiev were directed to a temporary office in Lviv, located about 70 kilometers from the border with Poland, the head of the Australian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Marise Payne, informed. The head of Australian diplomacy emphasized in a statement that the government strongly advises Australians to leave Ukraine immediately. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said in a press conference that the situation is entering a very dangerous phase, and added that Russia's autocratic, unilateral actions to intimidate Ukraine are totally unacceptable. Meanwhile, Canada has also temporarily suspended the activities of its embassy in Kyiv due to Russia's growing military presence on the border with Ukraine, and opened a temporary post in Lviv. Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly confirmed on Saturday.
We have already moved the families and others of our Australian-based staff in our mission in Kyiv. They have already departed some time ago, and we have 3 remaining staff, and they have been instructed now to move, as other Five Eye countries are, to Lviv. And you would have seen the announcement from the United States as well, and Canada, and that is the next stage in Australians being moved to safety.
Joly, quoted in a statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, emphasized that Canadian diplomatic presence and strong engagement in Ukraine will continue. Joly added that consular assistance for Canadian citizens will be provided by the mission in Lviv, but warned that the service will be limited.
As many as 50,000 people arrived in Venice, starting this year's Carnival celebrations. As the number of COVID-19 infections and hospitalizations has been gradually declining in recent weeks, the authorities decided to launch the festival for the first time since 2019. Saturday marked the beginning of the annual Carnival in Venice. This year's celebrations indicate a slight return to normalcy, as the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent restrictions made it impossible to host the 2 previous editions. This year's edition is called a Festival of Hope, as Italy's rate of new COVID-19 infections and hospitalizations has been gradually declining in recent weeks, sparking hopes for the end of the pandemic. This is the Carnival of Hope. COVID is ending, and we hope to return to our life as always. We hope to return to our normal lives with hope and enthusiasm. The decrease of COVID infections led the government in Rome to lift the obligation to wear face masks outdoors under most circumstances. Some key attractions, however, such as parades, will remain suspended to avoid contagion. The huge turnout is credited not only to COVID thaw, but also to the iconic role of the city of Venice in accommodating the legendary celebrations. I believe that Venice is based on art, and therefore it has to start again with art. Come to Venice, come and have fun. The Venice Carnival began centuries ago as a period of excess before the rigors of Lent, the 40 days of fasting that traditionally precede Easter. Venetians could then hide their identities behind masks and do as they please. And finally, it was the largest and best organized underground armed organization operating in German-occupied Europe. On February 14th, 1942, the Home Army was established. For this occasion, the heroes who fought for the freedom of Poland were commemorated today in Warsaw.
The event began with a holy mass in the field cathedral of the Polish Army. The homily was delivered by the field bishop Wiesław Lechowicz. The Home Army soldiers are also a blessing for the persistent and ultimately victorious fight for freedom, independence, and sovereignty of our homeland after the end of World War II. At 12 o'clock, there was a memorial call at the grave of the unknown soldier. During the ceremony, the Minister of National Defense, Mariusz Błaszczak, handed over acts of granting military symbols to units of the Territorial Defense Forces inheriting the traditions of the Home Army. If it were not for the attitude of the soldiers of the Home Army, there would be no solidarity later. And if it were not for solidarity, there would be no free Poland today. So this message, this attitude, was the foundation on which today's free Poland was built.
Na którym zbudowana została dzisiejsza wolna Polska. Możemy wam ślubować.
We can swear to you in this place, at Marshal Józef Piłsudski Square, that we will pass the banner of independence to the next generations, to our children, our grandchildren, that the independent, brightest Republic of Poland will last forever.
Naszym wnukom.
1942, by order of General Władysław Sikorski, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, the Union for Armed Struggle was transformed into the Home Army. General Stefan Rowecki, also known as Grot, took command of the formation as the Commander-in-Chief. The Home Army was the largest underground army in occupied Europe. It included about 200 organizations. In 1944, the structures of the Home Army numbered 390,000 people. Its largest military operation was the Warsaw Uprising.
As usual, thanks for tuning in this evening. Please stay with us for Poland Daily Business, Poland Daily Weather, and other programs. But from me, it's have a great week ahead.